Welcome to Mind Meets Body and Soul, a podcast that connects the dots between clinical mental health and spiritual holistic wellness. I'm Heather, a licensed clinical social worker and mental health guru.
And I'm Devon, a Reiki master, spiritual teacher, and lover of all things woo-woo. We're here to discuss various wellness topics, highlighting the connection between the mind, body, and soul.
We'll be offering nuggets of wisdom from each of our fields, with the ultimate goal of bridging the gap between our two worlds. Whether you lean more into cognitive psychology
or are guided by the ancient teachings of spirituality and energetics, our intention is to help you prioritize yourself and unlock a fresh perspective to healing, growth, and expansion. We're so excited you're here. Let's jump in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mind Meets Body and Soul, and a very special one for today. We are ringing in 1 year of Mind Meets Body and Soul, and also our, again, what we're coining our golden 50th episode, here with my co-host, Heather. Happy 1 year to us.
Happy 1 year. It's so exciting and wild to think about that we're here now. We've talked so much, I feel like, about getting to this point, and it just kind of feels surreal that it's been a whole year of this already. It feels like it's been a lifetime, but also like a minute at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. And before we really touch on that, I just have to talk about what just happened in New Jersey, felt in New York and Connecticut and Delaware. We just had an earthquake less than an hour ago. And my gosh, I need to stop asking how much crazier can eclipse season get, because every day I'm shown something new, and we just had an earthquake. So how are you doing where you are?
I'm good. We're down the shore, and it felt pretty mild here. I'm dog sitting, so the 3 dogs that I have, no, they didn't recognize anything, and I was here alone, and I'm like, did that just happen? Did I just experience that? And then you texted me and a couple other people, and I was like, oh my gosh, we just had an earthquake, and I don't think I've ever been experienced that before.
I think I've experienced an earthquake one time in New Jersey, but I remember in college, I was at Penn State in my dorm room freshman year, and there was a little bit of an earthquake that I felt in my dorm room. But other than that, for people listening, earthquakes are not common in New Jersey and on the East Coast. That is definitely more of a, West Coast thing. And it was did you say it was a 4.8 earthquake?
Yeah, that's what I heard. I didn't fact check that myself, but that's what I saw on 2 different text conversations, which I think is pretty significant, especially given here in New Jersey, but wild.
Yeah, really wild. So hopefully everybody who's listening, everyone was okay. It's interesting how it is felt in different places. And for example, I was in my room on a Zoom call, and all of a sudden it started happening. I'm like, oh my God, I think there's an earthquake right now. The whole house is shaking. Ellie's like, what the hell is going on? My mom was actually on the toilet during the earthquake. So she said the
Oh my
toilet
God.
was shaking. And then I look out the window and there's a woman walking by with her 2 dogs, which later on I went out with Ellie and I asked her, I was like, were you guys okay? She's like, I literally didn't feel anything. And I
It's
wonder if it's
crazy.
because she was walking in motion that she didn't, I don't know. So weird, but literally an earthquake happening. My whole house is shaking, and you're telling me you're right outside my house and not feeling a thing. And her dogs didn't feel anything either.
It is interesting though, not to get too into the science of an earthquake because I have no idea the science of an earthquake, but it does feel like it makes sense, one, being in motion, not recognizing it, but 2, I'm just picturing in my house right now, the cork board, the lamp, the water bottle, everything would shake. Where outside, things all do have movement to them, the trees are blowing
Mm-hmm.
and I just wonder if it is more noticeable inside versus outside.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. Well, it's interesting. I'm glad that your animals didn't react to it, because Ellie had a stress response to it. She was,
Oh,
visibly shaken up from it. But before we move on to this episode, it just speaks to what we have talked about in previous episodes. Like, we can learn so much from nature, from animals, in the way that just they take on life. Like Ellie, after she was visibly shaking, she shook out her body, right? Like, shook out her tail and her body and her head and her limbs. And what we've learned about stress responses is that that's an animal's natural tendency to release any kind of trauma from their body. And once like for a full minute, she was just shaking out her body on and off. And once she shook it all out, we went for a walk. She's been totally fine since.
Yeah, she like literally, her body was filled with that adrenaline and that stress response. And she like literally makes me think of Taylor Swift. Like she really literally needed to like shake it off.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're good. We're safe. She's in her bed, probably like napping from the stress that caused. So with that, we return to our very special episode. Heather, I am just really, really grateful to be here a year later with you. We have been meeting week after week, multiple times per week for the past year. April 11th, 2023 was the airing of our very first episode, and it's really beautiful to see how far we've come from there.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm also very grateful for you for thought downloading this podcast, for bringing in all of the conversations that you did and guiding us in so many ways. I'm also obviously very thankful for our listeners and everybody that tunes in, whether they're new listeners for single episodes or they've been following us all year. It's just really cool to sit here and feel like the love.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, thank you, our listeners. And with that, we have a special episode in order for you. So, a special conversation that we're going to be sharing. And also, at the end of the conversation, we have a fun giveaway for our listeners to participate in. And so, we'll get to that as well. When thinking about our 50th golden episode and our 1 year anniversary, the conversation that came to mind was around being the therapist, healer, teacher, coach, adult that a younger version of us sought out. And what brought this topic of conversation to mind, I was thinking about how much podcasts have really changed my life for the better. When I first started on my spiritual journey, on my self healing journey, I turned to podcasts for the very first time, looking up various things on self help and psychology and emotions and anxiety and all of that. And I found so much valuable information from there. That's actually how I found my spiritual coach, Michelle. And then here we are now, like a year too late, 2 years later from when I started my spiritual journey, starting our own podcast and hopefully being that safe, welcoming, comfortable space where we're having conversations on some, like, less talked about things, and we're normalizing it and we're connecting the mind, body, soul, and the our two worlds. And so this just feels like a really synchronistic time to look back at like who that younger version of us needed. And I don't necessarily mean like childhood. I mean, even literally 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago, what that person, what that version of us needed that we now bring forth to our clients, community, listeners, etc.
It is really interesting, and you speak a lot to like us being our own best case study. And I think I have a tendency to like overlook that because of like all the schooling or all the teaching they do for us in grad school and in undergrad about like it's not about you, disconnect from you. And you help me do a better job reflecting on myself and what I needed. And I remember like when you brought this topic up to me, I thought back instantly to the picture I posted when I graduated from grad school. And the caption said, if you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself, then make a change. And I think that's a Michael Jackson quote, but it does start with us. Our healing starts with us. Our ability to show up for other people starts with us. And I think this podcast started with us. So what a cool episode to make our golden 50th out of.
I love that. Thank you for looking back. And it's just beautiful that that quote stuck out to you then. How many years ago was that?
8, 9.
8, 9 years ago. And for that version of Heather to know that 8, 9 years down the line, she would be co-hosting this podcast where we would be sharing conversation now, 50 conversations on everything that we have learned, healed through, integrated ourselves, and are now sharing with the world around us, like creating that impact and that change from the inside out.
So tell us about what you've learned and what you've reflected on in preparing for this conversation. What is it that you want to share about this journey for you?
So I think back to the version of me who first started any type of self-discovery work. And it was in 2020, of course, no surprise, like quarantine times, a time that we were given to really start looking at our stuff, to really be with ourselves. And for me, it was the beginning of a new relationship, and some of the like turmoil that I was experiencing in that relationship that really drove me to ask those questions of like, why am I experiencing this? Why does this seem like it's a recurring pattern in my life? And I found myself getting to a point of like, I say desperation for lack of a better word, but getting to a place of desperation, like I need answers. Why do I feel so anxious in all of my relationships? Why do I lack trust in all of my relationships? And so that's what really began my deep dive search, where I started following different Instagram accounts and reading different books, and listening to podcasts was huge for me. I will always still remember typing into the Spotify search, like trusting in relationships. And I came across this one specific episode, and I wish I had gone back to it to look before we started recording here. But I remember it was exactly on what I was experiencing: anxiety in relationships and trust, and like lack of trust in relationships. And listening to that episode was such a light bulb moment for me. Like the episode that we had last week, there was something about the words that were being said, the insight that was being shared, that like my intuition was like, ding, 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 this deeply resonates with me. And this is something that I should pay attention to. And that is what led me to my very first life coach, that guest that was on that podcast episode. I enlisted in his community coaching program and learned a lot through him. And I really started to understand where a lot of where my anxiety in relationships came from, to the point that today, truly 4 years later, not even, I'm now speaking to tapping into your intuition and strengthening your relationship with yourself and thus with those around you. So that's been my journey.
I do think that you have really done a lot of work. I mean, I didn't know you at that time, but I do think of you as like an intuitive person. I think that you have really flexed that muscle of being able to listen to your intuition and trust it. And we had that whole episode last week. I just think, I don't know why, when you were talking, I had this visual that like our intuition is really sometimes us like almost closing our eyes and just like going in the direction that feels right. And like we don't always know why or where we're going, but we're just kind of like following a feeling. And I think you do that really well. And it has brought you to a really great place.
I keep forgetting that we have only known each other for like approximately a year and a half, heading on to 2 years, and that you don't know the version of me that existed before any type of healing work. Because, like, I'm so glad that you're saying this now that I come across as somebody who is in touch with her intuition. But that was not me. Like 4 years ago and beyond that, I looked to everything and everyone around me for validation of who I was, what I wanted, what was right for me and what wasn't right for me. Like I didn't have that sense of trust. And in fact, like it came up most in my relationships as, this stuff typically does. And it created a whole lot of anxiety in my life. This is like the number one thing that I would like to get across. And Heather, I would love to hear then your input, your side of things too. But like, I started this podcast for a past version of myself who was seeking answers, who was desiring more and wondering why she was so stuck. And podcasts really changed the game for me. And so, for those listening, if you find the conversations that Heather and I are sharing and the words that we're saying and the insight and the advice that we're giving, if you're finding it resonating, like, please let me know, let Heather know, because that is exactly what I aim to do in this podcast. And I know it's really not any different from you, Heather, but I would love to hear from you. Like, what has this podcasting journey been about for you, especially when you look back at that past version who was on her own journey of self-exploration?
The mission, like our mission statement at Growing Mindset Therapy, is to make mental health and wellness convenient, accessible, and a little fun. And that's like verbatim our mission statement. And I feel like this podcast is an extension of that. Like, this is a place that I want to be able to shout from the rooftops all of these conversations and allow people to have access to them in a convenient way. You can listen to this podcast on the beach, on your commute, while you're walking, while you're working. Like, there are so many ways that I want this to be a platform where we're making these conversations, these super important, super helpful, impactful, powerful conversations accessible to people who might not be ready, willing, able to go to therapy, to go to a healer, to go to a coach. So that was really my intention in joining you on this journey. When I think back about like my past versions of myself and younger versions of myself, I think trusting myself is a big theme. We had a whole conversation, feels like forever ago, but it had to be within the last year, on my ability to celebrate myself or my inability to celebrate myself. I think that this platform has helped the younger version of me in believing in the change that I'm making and like knowing that I'm having an impact, because I think it's really cool to hear people say, I shared my podcast with your mom, or like, I was thinking about the thing you said last week on that episode and wow. And while yes, that's external validation, it does affirm that the things that we're doing are having that positive impact and that like ripple effect, which is exactly what I wanted. And I think I really am here on this earth to like have that positive impact on other people.
So beautiful. And you absolutely are. And it's so cool that just in a 40-minute conversation can have such an impact. And what you were speaking to of like the ways in which it's helped you, like noticing where it's hard to celebrate, acknowledge and celebrate yourself, like the way that we are sharing these conversations, sharing our own personal challenges and wins and, milestone moments, like I know that that is reaching our audience in a way that then, inspires change in them, inspires them to acknowledge and celebrate themselves. And I just find that to be so cool.
I also think it's helped me realize whenever I'm posting our reels and like our content to social, I feel like sometimes I think about like people from college that I knew and I'm no longer connected to, or people from like high school, or just people from my past. And I'm like, they wouldn't even recognize me. Not like physically, I look pretty similar, but the person that I am now is so different from the person that I was in grad school, in college, in high school. And I think it's just also affirming that like we do change as people. People love to say like people can't change, people don't change, like a tiger doesn't change their stripes or whatever the sayings are. But we do. I stand so firmly in helping people change for a living. So maybe I'm a little biased in this conversation, but we're always evolving and we're always changing. And I think that's something that's also really cool. And I've taken away from this last year and growing up too. Like, we're allowed to change and we're allowed to tell people, hey, I am different now. My needs are different now. I'm just a different person now than I was then. And I think that's hard for some people that we've known our whole lives who've watched us over different versions of ourselves, but something that like I really do hold and believe strongly that we not only do change, but we're allowed to change and should be encouraged to change and grow into more evolved, better, impactful, powerful versions of ourselves.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And it just made me realize that I don't know the version of Heather that existed, you know, beyond 2 years ago. And like, it makes me feel so grateful to know this version of you. And also, like, I love the moments when I get to see what the past version of Heather was like as well. And it's such a good point, too, for those who are listening who have been with us for this entire year or have even just like listened back to those beginning episodes. Like, that version of us a year ago was different. I mean, Heather, you were beginning to dip your toes into the woo woo waters, right? And like you were beginning to open your eyes up to the angel numbers and some of the fun synchronicities. And then across this year, you learned so much more about the spiritual world and like how to connect it, tie it back to your psychology, you know, or clinical world. And likewise, I too, like I had been in a place where I was experiencing all of this spiritual stuff. And sometimes I find it really challenging to put into words. But when I look to your world and through our conversations, I'm able to see that like the stuff that I'm talking to, healing through, navigating is so closely tied or connected or interwoven with your world. And I love that through our conversations, you have helped me really see that.
I think it's been cool. I remember an early conversation that we had. We were saying, you know, in embarking on this journey, we were saying like there will be conversations where we agree and then conversations where we'll have to agree to disagree. And I feel like more often than not, we're talking about the same things. We're agreeing on a lot of the things that we're saying, and we really have worked to build this bridge, but and bridge the gap between the clinical world and the woo-woo world and the spiritual energetics of things. Like we are always on the same page about the things that we're talking about. We're just generally approaching it from different angles. So I think it's really cool to think back too over the last year, and all conversations that we've had have really had such impact from both sides. We've both had such important nuggets of wisdom and input to share on like such a variety of different types of topics.
Yeah. Yeah. I fully agree there. And I think it just goes to show the connectedness that we all share. Right. I talk
Mm-hmm.
about that like crown chakra connection a lot, or like spirituality being that truth that we are all connected. We are all one. We are all more similar than we are different. And I can see in my head like the check, like mission accomplished. And we're only 1 year into this podcasting process. And, you know, for however long it continues, I'm just so excited for all of the conversations to come.
I am too. And I'm going to just like spring this on you, Devon, because I just had a thought download. And I wonder if almost instead at the end, we're kind of, I guess, nearing the point of wrapping up, but maybe for this episode, what are your thoughts on instead of leaving our audience with a thought, a tip, or even like our vision board, what if we set an intention for this next year and really reflect on what we took from this past year and like set intentions going into this second year of Mind Meets Body and Soul?
I would love nothing more than that. And of course, we're talking about intention setting. That is the first conversation that you and I ever shared professionally. So it feels like a beautiful full circle moment. And to be honest with you, I really think we needed to have this conversation for this episode because, and this is a lesson that we can all take. We put so much effort and intention into something at the start, right? And like we're so involved in it in this podcasting process. Like you and I were meeting multiple times per week, talking like every single day, putting so much effort into this podcast to get it off the ground and running. And then along the way, it just became a part of our normal routine. And we've shared this in a conversation recently. Like we even got to a point like recently, a month ago or so, where we were feeling a little bit disconnected from one another because we were so in our own worlds, which was great. And also like there was a part like I felt a little sad about that. So I think we really needed to have this conversation here to come back to the intention of why. Why did we start this podcast in the first place? So I love that. And you know what? We are nearing the end of this episode, another short, sweet episode. Why don't we just talk about that right now? Setting the intention, which directs the flow of energy, to, from, through us and Mind Meets Body and Soul for the year ahead. What is it? What's calling out to you?
So, my word of the year for my business this year is elevate. And I do think that I want to apply that here. I think going into this next year, I'd love for us to take this beautiful foundation that we've created and elevate it. I want to expand on it. I want to elevate our conversations. I want to expand our reach and broaden the scope of people that are listening. And I just want to continue to grow. Growing is part of my business model for sure. So I just want more. Like I crave more conversation. I crave more expansion. Like I have so much more I think that we can do with these conversations. So I think I'm just feeling very like energized and excited and motivated. And I think those would be my intentions. Your word from last year, expansion, and my word from this year, elevate.
I love that. And I really, truly love seeing the version of you that's like, I want more. I want more depth. I want more conversations. I want more reach. Like, yes, let's lean into that desire for more in our lives because, like, that's where the good stuff is, right? Like, we don't get anywhere from being like, I'm content in life and I don't need to go anywhere else. Like, no, let's continually reach for more. I mean, this is also my strong Sagittarius placements. Like, more is always more. And also, I have to, sometimes reel it in. But for the sake of this conversation, more is absolutely more. And I love that word elevate of yours.
So how about for you, Devin? Is your intention or word for this next year of Mind Meets Body and Soul?
Taking inspiration from you, I think my business intention actually very much well complements yours of elevate because mine is co-create. And it just reminds me like we can get very far on our own. We know that very well. We've done that before. We also come to find that we can get so much further. We can elevate so much higher with the support, with the love of others around us. And I've recognized that like all of the healing work that I've done personally, all of the client work, the magic that happens in my client sessions, all of the business advancements, like it's all been done with the helping hand of one or many others. I just got off of a call with somebody and she reminded me of how when two minds come together, it forms a third mind or something like that. I don't quite know what the quote is there, but it's on this theme of collaboration, of co-creation. I mean, that's why I'm sharing this podcast with you. That's why we're sharing these conversations, because from this shared experience, we are co-creating something really beautiful. And so with this next year ahead, we're going to continue to bring on the expert guests that we do. We're going to continue elevating our conversations, deepening the meaning behind them together.
Yeah, I couldn't have imagined what this first year would bring. So I'm trying not to actually get into imagining too much what this next year will bring, because I want to be pleasantly surprised, as I was this year too.
Yep. And that is why we set intentions, because intentions are fluid. They set the directional flow of energy, but they also leave so much room for things to transpire and unfold exactly how they're meant to. So that is on intentions for Mind Meets Body and Soul for this next year ahead. Heather, thank you. That was a really beautiful suggestion. And with that, as we close out this episode, will you do the honors of sharing about this giveaway?
Yes. So we have come together, Devon and I, to bring a little giveaway to you. You know, I love gift giving. So, in the spirit of all things gift giving and celebration, we are going to be hosting a giveaway. So, in the spirit of reflecting back on the last year, we'd love to hear from you how this podcast has resonated with you, spoken to you, any reflections or thoughts that you have. So, we're inviting you all to rate and review our podcast on whatever platform it is that you listen on. And then, if you could just send us a screenshot of that review through Instagram. You can just Instagram DM us. You can send it to us via email if you're not on Instagram. And that will enter you into our giveaway. We'll be giving away a little Growing Mindset Therapy meets Enlighten and Empower, like items, kind of like swag bag things, all things inspired by Devon and I handpicked. And we'll be announcing the winner on our on April 16th. Though, if you want to and are listening to this episode after that, still go through and send us a screenshot of your rate and review, because we're hoping to have an ongoing giveaway process. So, yeah, we just want to hear from you guys first and foremost on what you like, what resonates with you, the impact that this is having, because it's one thing for us to sit here and have these conversations, but it comes full circle when we get to hear from you the impact that this has.
Well explained. And yes, we really look forward to making this giveaway a more regular part of this podcast, because we really appreciate you tuning in week after week and letting us know how these conversations are resonating with you. So thank you to our audience. Heather, thank you so much for this really beautiful, fun conversation. And with that, see you again next week.
Thanks, everybody. Bye. We are so glad that you took the time to share this space with us. We'll be releasing new episodes of Mind Meets Body and Soul every Tuesday, so be sure to give us a follow and share this podcast with those you love.
To connect with us and join our communities, head to the show notes where you'll find our contact information and individual websites. Until next week, stay grounded, keep growing, and trust that everything you seek is unfolding for you.